And if I could make a suggestion to maybe take your gum out before we start recording.
Oh, you don't like hearing that?
I don't think anyone wants to hear that on the podcast per
Well, joke's on you. I'm already recording.
se.
So a lot of people always are like, why do you pour the first cup out? And I say stuff like, oh, it washes the tea and it gets like most of like the gritty, like it washes the tea. It washes the tea is what I say.
Mhm.
But the real reason I pour the first cup out, you know why?
Tastes like shit.
No, it's
Just kidding.
because the guy that I learned how to drink tea with poured the cup out,
Yep.
the first cup out. Oh,
Oh,
oh my Lord.
oh, a little thin
Just
minted.
it exploded on you. So
Okay.
at 2 o'clock, 1:51 p.m. Hawaii Standard Time, we go into line 4. So by the time this gets out, it's going to be line 4. But I think let's definitely talk about line 3 because I'm very like a lot happened in line 3 for me that I'm
Yeah.
like curious to debrief on.
And we both have line 3 in
We
which
both have line 3. So yours is in Jupiter, mine is in Uranus and Neptune. Uranus is unusualness, chaos, and order in science, and then Jupiter is law and protection. Oh, gate 54.3, covert interaction. Exaltation, the ability when stymied in formal relationships to use secret or purely informal channels when it is the only resort. The drive when blocked to use secret means to fuel ambition.
Mm.
Detriment is the instance that formal channels, no matter how frustrating, can be overcome by the power of attraction. The energy of ambition when blocked to fuel the power of attraction to overcome the obstacle. Okay, I'm going to need to read that again. Or maybe we should just read the line.
We could go into this.
It could be more confusing or it could be
It's
less
probably
confusing.
more confusing.
Let's go for it.
Just go because this is like, yeah, it's very much focused on the marrying maiden.
Right.
So here we go. Okay, sixth and the third place of gate 54 means the marrying maiden as a slave. She marries a concubine. A girl who is in lowly position and finds no husband may, in some circumstances, still win shelter as a concubine. This pictures the situation of a person who longs too much for joys that cannot be obtained in the usual way. He enters upon a situation not altogether compatible with self-esteem. Neither judgment nor warning is added to this line. It merely lays bare the actual situation, so that everyone may draw a lesson from it.
Oh, that actually kind of helps. It's like the willingness to be like secretive or use subterfuge to like move quietly when it's necessary versus like when it's necessary you try and overcome the obstacle rather than trying to sneak around it.
Mm-hmm. But what I noticed in
Yeah.
yours is like not having the drive, so using secret means in order to get to where you want to go. Is that what it's like is talking about in the exaltation?
Yeah. Yeah. The drive when blocked to use secret means to fuel ambition.
Hmm.
Contrasted with the energy of ambition when blocked will fuel the power of attraction to overcome the obstacle. So I guess this doesn't make any sense.
They almost seem like the opposite of each other. Like when the drive is blocked, you find the ambition. Oh, wait, look at this one. The instance that formal channels, no matter how frustrating, can be overcome by the power of attraction. The energy ambition, when blocked, will fuel the power of attraction to overcome the obstacle. Oh, okay. So it's the energies that are of the ambition. When they're blocked, they'll fuel the power of attraction to come over the obstacle. So they use the power of attraction rather than using the energy of the ambition to overcome what's in front of you. So it's like utilizing what's going to be coming in rather than just having the ambition and drive to go forward. So it's like
Okay.
taking the energy from it's kind of vampiric. It's the way I'm like kind of catching on to this now.
Interesting.
And then the ability when what is stymied? informal
No
relationship,
idea.
to use secret or purely informal channels when it is the only resort. The drive when blocked to use secret means to fuel ambition. So it's like when there's a block and you can't fuel your ambition using secret means. But what do they mean by secret means? Or is this talking about covert interaction?
And then it's in the I Ching, it's talking about a concubine, but it's talking about like no judgment in like having a concubine. So to me, it's one of those things where it's like weird way to put this, but it's like if you're like a man, and of course we know like from our perspective, the I Ching is like super sexist, but from their perspective, it was just like this is how we get people to not kill each other.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like if a man has a wife and he's like politically inclined to like present himself with the wife, he might, for instance, have like a sexual desire that the wife doesn't necessarily want to meet. And so he has a concubine. So that way he can do his duties with his wife without putting any of the pressure on his wife. And in a way, it's like he keeps it secret so that it doesn't interrupt the dynamic that they have. That's kind of what I'm getting from it.
See, yeah.
Because it's ambition. It's like, hey, if you're playing a role and it's like a politician, play the role, and whatever you got to do to be able to play the role, do that, but do it in secret because, you know, sometimes it's like, you know, everyone's human. And if you have to hold the role of like more than a human, then it's like, hold that role.
Yeah. What I'm starting to think about is Marco Polo, that TV show.
Oh, yeah.
Kublai Khan with his wife and all of his concubines.
Uh-huh.
Not necessarily that he did anything with the concubines, but I'm thinking about the one that came to spy on him from, I can't remember, the guy who was like the praying mantis in the show. I don't remember his name, or like, I think he was South China. But it was his sister that came to spy on Kublai Khan and act as a concubine.
Yep.
And was doing secretive stuff behind closed doors with Kublai Khan's son. So it's like the energy of ambition when blocked will fuel the power of attraction to overcome the obstacle. So it's like if you don't seek out like something to fill your ambitions or sexual drive in the case that we're talking about, there's still going to be something like if you talk about it with your wife, the one that you're doing your governing with, then you can go in the positive direction and just seek it out. But then this guy's got sexual like desires anyway. He's going to go and seek it out on his own, whether he talks to his wife or not.
I see.
So that exaltation is like having that conversation first, and the detriment is like going around and like just like having a concubine being like, "Do you want this?" And he's like, "Oh, okay," but instead it's like, "Hey, wife, I want to do this. I know you don't want that. I'm gonna go look for it over here."
Interesting. What does stymed mean? I'm gonna look that up. To prevent or hinder the progress of. Okay, that makes sense. The ability when stymied in formal relationships to use secret or purely informal channels. Oh. It's like when you can't like publicly condemn somebody, but you have evidence that they're evil or a criminal is evil or someone is doing something evil, you hire assassins to kill them rather than like trying to do battle with them out in the open. So it's the ambition of when you can't administer justice or administer something through, like if you can't like, okay, I got it. So if you're a king and there's people that are starving and your court is like, we can't give food to those starving people, but you're like, no, we need to give food to those starving people. You hire a band of bandits to raid your storehouse and bring the food to the people. So that way the people get fed, you feel good about it, but you're not actually going against the formal channels. Because there's a lot in the Marrying Maiden about these like formalities. And in a way, it's kind of like the Marrying Maiden is this sort of like, because I see female energy as this thing being like, it doesn't matter about all those formalities. Like this is the right thing to do. Kind of that's the context that I'm looking at it under. But yeah, because then the opposite of that instance, that formal channels, no matter how frustrating, can be overcome by the power of attraction. It's this like, no, this has to be formalized. This has like, we have to make this happen. And, you know, for instance, it's like, instead of just going and like stealing the water back, you lobby for years and years and years and years and years, and you try and like fight within the matrix rather than just creating a new system that accomplishes the same task. That makes more sense now. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about the proper use of informality and discretion, which was the last line,
Mm-hmm.
to accomplish your ambition, as opposed to fighting the formal guidelines. Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
It does.
Yeah, I was like, I'm fucking stupid.
Well, yeah. That needed some deep dissecting. Also helps when we know what the word means.
Exactly. Yeah, the Stein thing sometimes will throw me off. We still got this one going, but I got to reignite.
Oh, okay.
To reignite the
flame.
Read that one again.
Yeah. So a girl who is in lowly position finds no husband may, in some circumstances, still win shelter as a concubine. And then this pictures the situation of a person who longs too much for joys that cannot be attained in the usual way. He enters upon a situation not altogether compatible with self-esteem. So it's like, okay, this direction, this is what I want to do, but I can't do it because of my self-esteem. So like, let me figure out a way to go circle around,
Right.
be able to get it done anyway.
It's like everyone has professional spies, and I have a concubine spy.
Yeah.
Very unprofessional, but also at the same time, like, ambition is ambition.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. Let's look at the third line of beginnings, 53.
Yeah.
So that's in the earth, so that might help. Practicality, of course. In its most natural position, the concentration on avoiding conflict to ensure protection and continued development. Wow. The pressure to eliminate conflict in order to develop. We should have just came here in the beginning. Jeez. Detriment, the unconscious provoking of conflict that logically threatens security and development. Energy which provokes conflict and threatens development. So yeah, it's like going against your courts in order to accomplish something, when you could also just like sneak around them and be sneaky and still accomplish it without having to deal with all the...
Mm-hmm. 9 in the third place means the wild goose gradually draws near the plateau. The man goes forth and does not return. The woman carries a child but does not bring it forth. Misfortune. It furthers one to fight off robbers. The high plateau is dry and unsuitable for the wild goose. If it goes there, it's lost its way and gone too far. This is contrary to the law of development. It is the same in human life. If we do not let things develop quietly, but plunge of our own choice too rashly into a struggle, misfortune results. A man jeopardizes his own life, and his family perishes thereby. However, this is not at all necessary. It is only the result of transgressing the law of natural development. If one does not willfully provoke a conflict, but confines himself to vigorously maintaining his own position and to warding off unjustified attacks, all goes well. So, like, I'm kind of seeing this as like, there's a fork in the road, and this fork is like AI and cryptocurrencies, digital asset, like being able to work online. And this side is like going and working construction job, et cetera, like being in this different like field. And it's like, which one is going to bring you better like amounts of abundance? Where's the future heading towards? And it's like being able to follow this one thing so that you can still actually do the other. But whereas if you don't have enough energy and you go in the construction way, or like some kind of pre-modern like job that takes a lot of hours of the week, you're working 40 to 60 hours a week, and you don't have enough time to focus on what's happening in the future or what's happening currently with cryptocurrency and AI, because there's a natural law of development. If you don't take that development and put your focus towards what's going to be happening, then your family's going to suffer. You might not have the finances you need. You might suffer for a longer amount of time to get to the same point, whereas if you followed the stream that was more abundant.
I got a different kind of perspective.
Yeah.
It was like, it's kind of more about the maturity of something. Like, for instance, if you have a child who's like sword fighting and he's learning sword fighting, and maybe he's really ambitious, you don't put him in a war till he's like actually ready to be in the war. That's kind of where I was like, when you were reading it about, I was like, oh, it's kind of just like not exposing things to the test until they're ready.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you don't put a tree out in full sunlight when it's still a sapling and it needs a little bit more shade. So it's like attending to, and in terms of the cryptocurrency, it would be like, um, you know, having all this money and just throwing everything into crypto versus like being in the learning phase and accepting the learning phase. Because it says here practicality.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a bunch of stuff in there about like the goose and the woman that has the baby, but she's not bringing it forward. It's like when Emerald had we had our baby, right? She, no one was touching the baby. She kept it like secret for a while so that we could be the ones to imprint on it to make it strong. And then we introduced it to the world when it was time. And maybe even, according to other people, like, oh, we waited too long, or like by social standards, like Emerald's mom didn't even hold Venus for like months after she was born.
Right.
So, but I kind of hear the path that you're talking about is more in terms of like the financial world and being able to recognize like what's actually going to be practical. Because it's like, yeah, it's like you can build and focus all your energy on building, but if you focus your energy on creating resources, then you can build and plant and do all these other things. So I had to get there from my
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah, totally. It's like the same perspective, but different route. Yeah.
Well, different stages of the development.
That too. Yeah. It's like you said, like you don't want your kid to go and fight your war.
Yeah.
13 years old, even if he's a skilled sword fighter, he
Right.
doesn't have the wherewithal to like hold himself against men who are twice, 3 times his age.
Yeah. And there's also, it's like the detriment of this probably is one that is unconscious provoking of conflict that logically threatens security and development, energy which provokes conflict and threatens development. So
like the development of the kingdom, say you've got your prince, like in that instance,
yep,
he's a sword fighter and he's really good. And
you want to flex on everyone else.
Yeah.
So you send him off and he dies and it's like, fuck.
There goes my firstborn son.
Exactly.
Now the kingdom does not prevail.
Exactly, dude. Okay.
Have more sons.
Exactly. I get that. That makes a lot of sense now.
Yep.
And then as it pertains to 54 and ambition, it's like, what are some, in terms of like covert things, how can I like build the prince's reputation, give him a taste of action without exposing him to like these grander dangers is kind of my thinking, is where I'm going with it.
54, line 4.
54, line 4. All right. So we have enlightenment / endarkenment. And there's no detriment on this one. So the exaltation is here. In the most mystical of positions, there is neither an exaltation nor a detriment. For in truth, they are the same. No exaltation, the Alpha and the Omega, the end and the beginning. There is no description possible. Each planet will manifest this energy uniquely with absolutely no guarantee that its effects will even be perceived. However, the potential is always there, the fuel for transformation at its purest level. No polarity, no specific planetary accent, no detriment.
Whoa. This feels like the void, like between time and space, because it's all same and relative and not relative at the same exact time.
Right. Well, it says there's no, like each planet will manifest this energy uniquely with absolutely no guarantee that its effects will even be perceived. So it's like, this is one where it's like to look for the point on a circle is fruitless. And it's the fourth line of the marrying maiden, which, fourth line of a tribal network is like, it's one of those things where I think it's kind of like you're never going to know whether or not this is going to be a good or a bad thing.
Yeah. Until you do it.
Until you do it, or until you start to see the greater impact of it.
And it's neither a good or bad thing, right? Because it will have its negative and positive impacts between like it being a lesson or it being fruitful.
Right.
Because everything's either a lesson or it's just like, that was either way, it's a lesson.
Yeah.
And it's either like, I'm never doing that again, or I'm going to do this again because it's
a lot
awesome.
Or I'm going to do this a lot. Okay.
You do that a lot. Didn't have the cadence to it. How many times do you do that? A lot.
I don't
All right, so 9 in the fourth place. We'll go I Ching. The marrying maiden draws out the allotted time. A late marriage comes in due course. The girl is virtuous. She does not wish to throw herself away and allows the customary time for marriage to slip by. However, there is no harm in this. She is rewarded for her purity, and even though belatedly, finds the husband intended for her. So this is talking about the marrying maiden not become like the third line was talking about her being concubine because she did not find a husband. So she's like, well, I need to find someone to love me and
or
if I
someone to
don't
give me shelter at
or
least.
shelter. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But I have no husband, but I'm out of my parents' house now or my family house because they're like, yeah, you get out of here. You're not worth anything, which unfortunately that was like how things happened in that time frame of China.
Right.
It was what in Japan too. I forget what's the geishas.
Mm.
So that was like the similar thing in Japan was like they would sell off their daughters, and if they were like pretty enough, they would become a geisha and become like the entertainment to the elites essentially.
Yeah, whoever could
But
pick.
they weren't necessarily concubines though. Like they wouldn't sleep with, they would still find. So this is like the geisha. This line is like a geisha. Because they wouldn't necessarily sleep with any of the men they were entertaining. They would just get really good at like fanning, like doing fans and beautiful stuff,
Like stimulating them,
stimulating and
helping them relax.
and like sit with them, talk with them, drink tea with them, give them entertainment. But then when the right man would come around, they would pay to purchase the geisha from their, I don't know,
Harem,
the harem. Is that correct? Like wherever they were living.
brothel, or what?
Yeah, essentially.
I don't know too much about geishas, but
Yeah, I watched a movie about it recently with Cheyenne, Spencer and Journey, but
cool.
because they never give away their purity, they never have sex, then they can still be rewarded for this. And even though it's a later like time frame for them to be getting married, they're still in success because they waited for the right opportunity, even if it felt like it didn't come at the right time when it was meant for them at 16, 17, 18, 19.
Okay. So it, like the whole concept of enlightenment is like, this is kind of contextualizing, like a seed needs to be planted. It's in total darkness before it actually becomes enlightened. And you can judge the seed for being in darkness, but that's where the roots grow. And that's where like the cultivation of the purity, and you get to see whether or not like that purity is actually real or whether or not she's just going to like, be a half-ass geisha or like a real good geisha.
Yeah, which in that movie that I watched, Memoirs of a Geisha is what it's called. There's the geisha who's like the head geisha of this house, and she makes the most money, and she's trying to ruin it for this new young geisha who comes in as a young girl. But then that young girl sees her like hooking up with this, super attractive man because she wants to, and she's like, oh, like she's going against everything that we do.
Right.
She ruined herself as a geisha because she went and chose this young, beautiful man who doesn't have any money rather than waiting for herself to be chosen upon somebody because her time frame was coming to an end. She was afraid and just grasped onto something.
So it's very interesting that ambition and the marrying maiden are like interlinked because this is all about like when you're on the splenic side of the body graph, it's very much so, and then on the tribal side, it's very much so about taking care of what has been birthed. Whereas when you're on the solar plexus side, like the 1949, the 659, the community, it's really about creating the children, creating the life, bringing new members into the tribe. And then on the other side, it's about making sure that everyone is, how you say, like you have the 50 and 27, that's connecting the spleen and the sacral. That's about like making sure like nourishing people. This ambition and spleen one, this is about like knowing the channel of like what can transform and what can't transform. Because it's like what we're talking about is like a woman's journey of like how she becomes a part of a tribe is what I'm seeing, or a part of a family is what I'm noticing with this, like the marrying maiden, and how interesting that like flavor of ambition is. Like the flavor of ambition of a woman that wants to be a wife.
Yeah,
that just keeps coming up that way.
for sure. And well, I just looked up the definition of ambition because to me, this very much comes off as like a feminine driven storyline or story arc that we're going through of ambition,
Right.
because it's the marrying maiden. But then in the Ravi Ching, they talk about ambition rather than the marrying maiden.
Right,
That the
right.
focus is more on that. So ambition is a strong desire to do or achieve something, typically requiring determination and hard work. So aspiration, intention, goal, aim, drive, determination, desire. So it's like having the ambition. I can see how it's like the creative energy to get something that you want, which is very much a feminine aspect of life. Is like we have to create our own path so that we can get to the path that we want to get. It
Right.
may take masculine energy to pave the way for the path, whether it's like, oh, I'm going to go chop down the cane grass to get to the stream or whatever, but I want to get to that stream. The only thing stopping me is this cane grass. So I got my machete and I'm going to
Right.
just make my way through. And in that too, when I go back and look at the lines, it's an even balance between yang and yin. So the bottom half of the hexagram, or the hexagram,
The
is
lower trigram.
the lower trigram, exactly, is the lake, which is 2 yang lines and 1 yin. And then the upper trigram is 1 yang line and 2 yin lines, which is thunder. So it's the joyous lake above the arousing thunder. So like joy,
Wait, the lake under the thunder.
lake under the thunder.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So the thunder is like crashing down on the lake, which we never went over the image because we started from the third line.
Yeah.
Could be something that we could look at some point. But joy and arousement are also very like feminine energies to like be engulfed in joy, like we were talking about earlier. That like ambition energy.
Yeah. Yep. And transformation in the context of human design. It's like you need a woman to transform.
It's exactly what you got me sparked off of.
Yeah.
Yeah, because transformation, it's like the only way you can transform and build the village is with women.
With
you
women.
can't do it without women.
Yeah, and you also
Feminine
can't
energy.
just lead a village through the masculine lens
Right.
as well. So I looked up the etymology of ambition. Proto-Indo-European root meaning around from both sides. Root is ant, which is front or forehead, which is like anterior chain.
Right.
E, which means to go, or egi means to go. Which is funny, in the 1800s, this was used a lot more than it is now.
The word ambition?
Yeah, like a lot more. Wow.
Well, maybe they didn't have words like intention and drive, determination, desire.
Yeah.
I mean, they obviously did, but
Eager or inordinate desire for honor or preferment. Yeah, because ambition is to like, and 54 is the pressure to like pursue a higher status or more material belongings within the context of like a tribe. So it's very much so also about comparison. And then the connecting gate to this 54, it's 32. 32 is the awareness of what can transform. And so 32 is almost kind of like the matchmaker energy in terms of the marrying maiden of like, oh yeah, this woman would make a good wife for you because she is very yin and soft and you're very hard. And that's a good match. Versus this woman is really good for you because you're very soft and yin and you need a woman to kind of like ground you. So this is just the pure pressure and the pure ambition, untempered by that matchmaking energy, which is, we're going through all these phases of like the different types of women and the different types of like statuses that they come with.
Right.
All right.
I'm going to read the 53 line 4.
Let's do it. 53 line 4 is assuredness. Exaltation is the ability to maintain the strength of one's individuality in complex and often awkward situations. That ensures security and continued development. The pressure to maintain one's individuality in confusing beginnings. Detriment is the persistent difficulty with embarrassing or awkward situations where normal emotional reactions may prove detrimental. Individual pressure for beginnings that creates awkward and sometimes embarrassing situations. So it's like losing your center when you're embarrassed versus not, like being able to laugh it off and be very zen about it.
Mm-hmm. See what the I Ching has to say too.
Mm-hmm.
6 in the 4th place means the wild goose gradually draws near the tree. Perhaps it will find a flat branch, no blame. A tree is not a suitable place for a wild goose, but if it is clever, it will find a flat branch on which it can get a footing. A man's life, too, in the course of its development, often brings him into inappropriate situations in which he finds it difficult to hold his own without danger. Then it is important to be sensible and yielding. This enables him to discover a safe place in which life can go on, although he may be surrounded by danger. So it's like, if we're looking at it from the I Ching and the royalty and like military aspect, it's like going maybe to go have a conversation with somebody of an opposing force and then being surrounded by danger, not really like having to figure it out on the fly, how to get out of that dangerous situation.
Mm-hmm.
Because now you've just made an ass of yourself by showing up and they're like, fuck you doing here?
Well, this is reminding me of that favorite quote that I have. It's like, it's not the strength of the branch, but the strength of your wings that determines your level of safety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the branch can fall at any moment.
Right.
But can you fly away?
Always.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes no. Sometimes you bind your wings up.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, you put too much trust on the branch. So tomorrow at 11:55 a.m. Hawaii Standard Time, we go into the 5th line of Gate 54 in the sun and Gate 53 in the earth. And for that, we have magnanimity. No detriment, no polarity, just the exaltation, the natural authority and actualizing spirit that in a position of power can have genuine and fruitful relationships with the less advantaged, as long as they are in service and make no demands. The energy for actualizing that, despite this power, fuels fruitful relationships with others. So it's just like, there's very clearly a hierarchy in the world. You have more money, you have more resources, you have more vehicles, you have more connections. And it seems like this one is the ability to like have relationships with those types of people. As long as those people are not trying to get something from me because I have more resources from them.
6 in the 5th place means the sovereign I gave his daughter in marriage. The embroidered garments of the princess were not as gorgeous, so poetic, were not as gorgeous as those of the serving maid. The moon that is nearly full brings good fortune. Wow, okay. Interesting. So the sovereign the sovereign I, is Tong the completer. This ruler decreed that the imperial princesses should be subordinated to their husbands in the same manner as other women. And it says hexagram 11, 6 in the 5th place. The emperor does not wait for a suitor to woo his daughter, but gives her in marriage when he sees fit. Therefore, it is in accord with custom for the girl's family to take the initiative here. We see here the girl of aristocratic birth who marries a man of modest circumstances and understands how to adapt herself with grace to the new situation. She is free of all vanity of outer adornment, and forgetting her rank in her marriage, takes a place below that of her husband, just as the moon, before it is quite full, does not directly face the sun. Well, that was extremely confusing. Like, we're gonna make this. The imperial princesses should still marry their husbands in the same manner as other women. Wow. I don't understand this one.
Let us drink.
Let us drink. Maybe we should go to the other gate for understanding.
Yes, I think so. That's a great idea. Gate 53.5. Only a detriment. An over assertiveness that, rather than applied to maintaining support in the face of opposition and isolation, may actually strengthen the opposing forces with its attitude, where the energy for beginnings attract the very forces that can abort them. This is actually very interesting because this is something that is sort of an enemy of authenticity, which is like presenting them like a masked self.
Mm-hmm.
But this is literally talking about like there's times when you want to wear a mask because if you don't wear that mask, it's going to abort the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like pulling up to a board meeting and not disclosing all of the problems that you have because you want to be transparent. Like your goal is to get this thing going.
Right.
And you trust that you'll handle these problems and that they're not going to affect your intention of where you're going. And so you essentially wear a mask.
That makes sense.
Assertion, and it's in detriment in the earth.
I also see that, yeah. I see that as like not showing all your cards. It's like something that I saw in a video recently is like, don't tell anybody what you're up to.
Yeah.
Don't tell anyone, because it immediately, now you have someone else's energy pushing towards what you just told them about. Like, for instance, say, I want this job at Starbucks as the manager. I'm going to become the manager at Starbucks. Now you're going to be thinking, what, bro? Like, why the fuck do you want to be a manager at Starbucks? That energy coming towards me starts to diminish the actual power and force of me going forward.
Right. Or I could tell the manager and be like, hey, yo, Luke is trying to get your job, bro.
Yeah.
He's like, all right, well, I'm going to fuck with him.
So 9 in the 5th place means the wild goose gradually draws near the summit. For 3 years, the woman has no child. In the end, nothing can hinder her good fortune. So the summit is a high place. In a high position, one easily becomes isolated, placing themselves above something else, right? One is misjudged by the very person on whom one is dependent. The woman by her husband, the official by whose superior. So if someone is above them, they can be misjudged by who they are dependent on. So there could be a misjudgment, right? In that sense. And this is the work of deceitful persons who have wormed their way in. The result is that relationships remain sterile and nothing is accomplished. But in the course of further development, such misunderstandings are cleared away and reconciliation is achieved after all. So it's like the same thing that we were talking about. It's just like, I am going to achieve this great thing. But by telling somebody that, takes away the energy from it. Like of, yeah, I'm going to achieve this.
Destroys the beginning and also is a sort of hollow ambition. Line 6, gate 54, line 6, selectivity. Exaltation is the integrated responsibility in terms of maintaining security and personal identity that will naturally restrict its relationships to ones that are mutually beneficial. The energy to restrict relationships that hinder ambition. That's clear. Detriment is a generally benefic and expansive nature that assumes that it can instill what is otherwise missing in its partners, a waste of energy. The waste of energy in maintaining relationships which hinder ambition. So that's obvious, like trying to change someone versus just finding someone who already is the way that is going to be harmonious for you.
Right.
Easy.
Okay. So we've got 6 at the top, means the woman holds the basket, but there are no fruits in it. The man stabs the sheep, but no blood flows. Nothing the axe to further. At the sacrifice to the ancestors, the woman had to present harvest offerings in a basket, while the man slaughtered the sacrificial animal with his own hand. Here the ritual is only superficially fulfilled. The woman takes an empty basket, and the man stabs a sheep slaughtered beforehand, solely to preserve the forms. This impious, irreverent attitude bodes no good for a marriage. So it's like the ritualistic act without the actual like sacrifice behind it.
It's like being half in, half out of a relationship because you're like, this isn't really the person I want to be with, but at least I'm getting sex.
Yeah, right.
Right.
But at least I'm getting sex.
Which is interesting as the 6th line. So this is like role model energy. Right. And it's I like the fruit with no basket. It's like That's like a woman who, like if you, as a man who wants children, if you were to be dating a woman who didn't want children, that's a woman with a basket but no fruit in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then same thing, a woman who wants to have children, but a man who maybe doesn't want to provide for her or have children, he's like stabbing the sheep, like, look, I can do this,
Yeah.
but he's not actually the one killing it.
Yeah, and eventually he's gonna poke the fucking guts, and then it's gonna spill.
Then all the poop is gonna get on the
exactly. Yeah. Making a fool out of himself. All right.
Awful. Well,
Lastly, 53.6.
53.6. Phasing. Moon in exaltation, the successful utilization of the completion of a stage in development, that by its evident success and value can be used as an example to attract support for the next stage, the energy to attract support for beginnings based on the success of the past.
Yeah, so it's like if you can go to somebody with your business or whatever it may be and say, I was successful with this. I've sold that business off. I now have these assets and I want to start something new. Then the other person can be like, oh yeah, I have experience in this. Let me work with you and help you because I see that you've done this already.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's simple.
Super simple.
Detriment is a tendency in this position to hide success in the perverse fear that the success will either create excessive demands or supporters of the original process will end their support upon completion. The pressure to hide beginnings in fear of losing past support.
That's interesting. It is interesting, yeah, because it's like you don't want to lose past support because, like, maybe, for instance, this is an example, you've got friends that you grew up with and, you came up in hard times together. You were all poor and you had struggle. But you don't want to tell them now that you're like financially stable or that you're happy and you're making good money because you're worried that they're going to be like, fuck you, dude. Like, where's my money? Help me out. Throw me a bone,
Right.
And it's like, that it's the fear, so that's a detriment. Instead of being like I'm doing so good now, like I'm doing this practice where I do 10% of what I make, I give it to people who are in need. Like, do you need something right now? Could $600 help you right now? Like that kind of energy. So it's like the exaltation versus the detriment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's pretty. It's funny how like it totally all comes together.
So 9 at the top means the wild goose gradually draws near the cloud heights. Its feathers can be used for the sacred dance, good fortune. Here life comes to its end. A man's work stands completed. The path rises high towards heaven, like the flight of the wild geese when they have left the earth far behind. There they fly, keeping to the order of their flight in strict formation. If their feathers fall, they can serve as ornaments in the sacred dance pantomime performed in the temples. Thus the life of a man who has perfected himself is a bright light for the people of earth, who look up to him as an example. So yeah, it's like the way, this thought came up too, just to like wrap on this, is that like all those TikTok shop affiliates that have become super successful are not just focusing on doing TikTok shop now and selling goods. They're still doing that because it's their bread and butter, and they may have made like, whatever, 30K months. Like some of these people are making insane amounts of money. But now what they've done, even though they've only been doing it for 10 months, is telling people how much money they made openly because they're like, look, I made 30K off TikTok this month. I made 25K.
Learn from me.
Yeah. And now they're making more money by telling people how they did it in order. So it's like, it's the cycle of life. It's like the birth of something else has to be the death of the other, right? So it's like, but it's also still a rebirth of whatever it may be. So it's just like refining and redefining.
Well, I think that's what you're saying right there is like the detriment, because sometimes it feels like you're going in circles and like you have to kill something, but it's like you don't kill your first child so that you can have a second child.
Right.
You don't have to destroy your first income so that you can make a second income. That is only for people that are trading time for dollars, right? Because you can create more income if you can, but if you don't have the time and the energy to do it, then you can't.
Which is like we were talking about earlier. So yeah, it's the ambition to begin like this in the I Ching. It's this 53 is called development or gradual progress. So them being side by side next to each other is interesting too. Like for the transit in this, like 54 and 53.
Right. They're
Because
both
they're
in the
not.
root.
Yeah, they're both in the root too.
Mhm.
It's almost like they're the same thing but different energies. Like ambition is the top funnel, like the stream coming down from
Yep.
above,
Mm-hmm.
and then the development is coming up from the earth. So it's upward energy. They're almost like opposing forces, but going in the same direction. They meet in the middle for the
Yeah.
same similar goal because it's drive, it's in intention, how you're going to start something is driven by your ambitions, intentionality behind it.
And then how you fulfill your ambitions is you recognize that you're at the beginning of something.
Mm-hmm.
And then also too, because it's like the 53 connects to something in the sacral, and the sacral is about these pulses of like, okay, now you've brought this to maturity. Now it's time to end that and like actually begin something anew. Because it's like if we go to like the harmonic, the 42 is growth. And that channel is about like the cycles, bringing things to an end, reflecting on it, gaining maturity. Um, and it's more about the journey rather than the destination.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to recognize being at the beginning, being in the middle, being at the end, and ultimately with this one, the phasing. Phasing is an interesting word because phasing in music production, it means like you have two sound audio forms that are the same, and you do this. Boop, just a little bit, and it creates this like kind of effect.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the fear of phasing or the acknowledgement that it's like, hey, it's a dynamic kind of thing. You just have to recognize what stage of the development that you're at.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's interesting that people will like the detriment in this sixth line is like the whole fear of losing past support,
right,
or fear of people wanting things from you. Mm-hmm. And that is a lack of selectivity, which is in ambition. Yeah. So yeah, it's like obviously it's like we have to have both of them. And this one also is, so if ambition is the lake above the mountain, or sorry, the thunder above the lake.
Yeah. Then the opposite is, it's completely different.
No, it's complete. Well, what it is it's the inverse of it. It's not
Right.
like the trigrams switch places.
Yeah.
It's so what is that? That is
the yang and yin switch places.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the mountain
under
the wood or the wind. The wind.
Mountain under the wind. So wind above the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
So we go wind above the mountain, which is below.
Because development, like if there's, what's up, pig? There's a mama with her little babies.
Yeah. Speak of development, the marrying maiden.
Yeah. And development, if we're looking at it from the wind on the mountain, the wind is what causes the mountain to develop. So if there's a tree that has seeds, it's going to blow the seeds off of the tree further onto the mountain to grow more trees. Right? That is like the progression of development.
Sweet, dude. So this is all, it's funny because the ambition is not really what I thought it was.
What did you think it was?
I mean, it's like, ambition is like, what am I ambitious to move towards? But now that we've talked about it, it's so much more about the stage of ambition and like the beginning of ambition rather than the fulfillment of ambition. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like the staying pure so that you can fulfill your ambition, and recognizing that like there's certain things that need to be protected if your ambition is to actually become fulfilled. But it's all in preparation for this 41st gate, at least in the context that we're exploring it. And so, I mean, I'm really curious to see how, like, because this third line has been very, there's been a lot of like confrontational energy. Mm-hmm. And we talked about the confrontation and how it's like, in a way, kind of needs to be avoided so that the beginning and the development can continue. Forget if that was the fourth or the fifth line. But yeah, no, it's created so much more context around how I'm viewing this transit.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause I had a lot of predisposition towards like, you know, in the context of moving towards the New Year's, I had a lot of ideas about. They were very simplified ideas, and so now that this one is fleshed out, it's doesn't necessarily make more sense, but it definitely feels more alive now.
Yeah, totally. And also noticing that we're in the beginning of this.
Yep.
And that there's a lot still in store for us to
Yep.
learn, like, while being able to see 10 years down the road, like if we continue to show up for this, and that's only 10 repetitions of a cycle. But within the cycle, we'll see these gates twice, right? Because they will switch positions.
Right. Which is
The Earth will then be in the sun will be in the Earth.
so
So that's like 20 times that we would see this in the next 10 years. I'm curious to see, just how it develops for both of us, like over time,
totally,
like
man.
how we recognize the cycles. I know we said that when we started doing this originally on the human design Discord
Mm-hmm.
on Evolve. And yeah, excited to like continue this and just be more on point. Just
Yeah.
continue.
That's a wrap. Oops.